What if I told you the dream of human flight didn't begin in a bicycle shop in Ohio, but was etched into stone thousands of years ago, deep inside crumbling temples, buried beneath layers of dust and time, lie secrets that defy our understanding of history. These aren't just carvings or decorations, they're precise, intricate blueprints of flying machines, detailed with an accuracy that rivals modern engineering. How is it possible that ancient cultures, with tools we'd consider primitive, could have envisioned or even built crafts capable of soaring through the skies? The answers might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to decipher them. From the soaring pyramids of Egypt to the labyrinthine temples of India, whispers of flight echo through the ages. Take the famous Saqqara Bird, a wooden artifact discovered in an Egyptian tomb. At first glance, it looks like a simple figurine until you notice its aerodynamic wings and tail fin, perfectly designed for lift and stability. Or the Vimana, mythical flying chariots described in ancient Sanskrit texts with such technical detail that scholars debate whether they were mere legend or lost technology. These aren't isolated oddities, they're pieces of a puzzle scattered across continents, pointing to a knowledge far beyond what we've credited to the ancients. But here's the most tantalizing question. If these designs were real, who created them? Were they the work of visionary inventors ahead of their time? Or could they hint at something even more extraordinary, a forgotten chapter of human innovation? As we peel back the layers of myth and history, we'll examine these blueprints not as curiosities, but as potential evidence of a lost science. Along the way, we'll confront theories that challenge the boundaries of archaeology and aviation, and ask whether our ancestors might have touched the sky long before we ever thought possible. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a quest to uncover the untold story of flight itself. One of the most perplexing artifacts sits quietly in the Cairo Museum, labeled simply as a bird-shaped toy. But the Sakara Bird doesn't just resemble a bird, it has the distinct features of a glider, with wings that curve like an airfoil and a tail fin designed for stability. When engineers reconstructed it using modern materials, they made a startling discovery. It didn't just look like a flying machine, it could actually glide. This wasn't a child's plaything, it was a meticulously crafted model, hinting at an understanding of aerodynamics that predates the Wright brothers by millennia. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, ancient Indian texts like the Mahabharata describe the Vimana, sophisticated flying chariots capable of incredible speeds and maneuvers. The descriptions go beyond poetic imagination, detailing intricate mechanics, propulsion systems, even aerial battles. Skeptics dismiss them as myth, but the precision in these accounts raises an unsettling possibility. What if these weren't just stories, but records of real technology? Even more intriguing are the temple carvings in places like Ellora and Mahabalipuram, where massive stone structures depict what look eerily like winged aircraft, complete with cockpit-like compartments and streamlined bodies. Then there's the mystery of the Nazca Lines in Peru. While most focus on the sprawling animal figures etched into the desert, a few designs stand out, geometric patterns resembling modern runway markers. Some researchers suggest these could have been landing strips for ancient aircraft, a theory bolstered by local legends of sky gods descending in fiery vessels. And let's not forget the Mayan artifact known as the Palinque Astronaut, a sarcophagus lid carved with a figure seated inside what looks unmistakably like a spacecraft, complete with control panels and exhaust plumes. The real question isn't just whether these cultures imagined flight, it's whether they achieved it. Could there have been a golden age of innovation, lost to time, war, or catastrophe. The evidence is fragmented, scattered across continents and centuries, but the patterns are too consistent to ignore. These weren't random doodles or symbolic art. They were blueprints, instructions, perhaps even warnings. And if we're willing to look past conventional history, we might just uncover the truth about humanity's first flight, long before we thought it possible. Buried in the sands near an Egyptian tomb over 2,000 years ago, the Sakara Bird doesn't just defy expectations, it rewrites them. At first glance, this small wooden artifact seems unremarkable, barely the size of a human hand, its surface worn smooth by centuries. But tilt it just right, and you'll notice something extraordinary. The curvature of its wings mirrors the precise aerofoil shape used in modern aircraft, designed to generate lift. The tail fin isn't decorative, it's a stabilizer, angled to keep the craft level in flight. Every detail suggests this wasn't carved by accident, but with intention, as if the creator understood principles of aerodynamics centuries before the term even existed. When engineers reconstructed the Saqqara Bird using lightweight materials like balsa wood, they didn't just admire its form, they tested it. The results were startling. Tossed into the air, the replica didn't tumble or wobble. It glided smoothly, catching air currents like a paper airplane engineered by a physicist. This wasn't a fluke. The proportions, the weight distribution, even the angle of the wings, all of it worked in harmony to achieve stable flight. So why does mainstream archaeology still label it as a toy or a ritual object? Perhaps because the alternative, that ancient Egyptians might have grasped flight mechanics, forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about their technological prowess. Skeptics argue that the bird's design could be coincidence, a happy accident of craftsmanship. But then there's the context. The artifact was found near scrolls detailing complex mathematics and astronomy, hinting at a culture capable of sophisticated calculation. And it's not alone. Across Egypt, carvings depict hybrid creatures with wingspans too exact to be purely artistic. Some even show figures holding what look like handheld flying devices. Could these be fragments of a larger, lost knowledge? The most compelling clue lies in the bird's missing piece, a small hole at the base, as if something once attached there. Some researchers propose it held a propeller or a launching mechanism, turning the model into a functional prototype. Others suggest it might have been part of a larger apparatus, like a ceremonial display meant to mimic flight. But here's the haunting possibility. What if this model wasn't a model at all? What if it was the real thing, a scaled-down version of something much larger, now lost to time? Whether the Sakara Bird was a toy, a religious symbol, or something far more advanced, one thing is undeniable. Its existence cracks open a door to history we've barely begun to explore. And if this single artifact can challenge our assumptions so profoundly, what else might be waiting in the shadows of forgotten temples, daring us to look closer? The ancient Sanskrit texts of India don't just hint at flight, they describe it with startling precision. Take the Mahabharata, a sprawling epic that dates back thousands of years. Amidst its tales of heroes and cosmic battles, there are passages that read less like mythology and more like technical manuals. The Vimanas, celestial chariots said to soar through the skies, aren't vague or fantastical. They're depicted with intricate details. Multi-tiered decks, propulsion systems that hum with energy, even weapons capable of unleashing destruction reminiscent of modern missiles. One passage describes a vimana as self-moving, adorned with jewels and radiating light, but then adds a curious detail. Its movement was controlled by quicksilver and whirlwinds, a phrase that has led some researchers to speculate about advanced propulsion methods, possibly even mercury-based engines. What makes these accounts so compelling isn't just their specificity, it's the consistency across multiple texts. The Ramayana, another foundational Indian epic, describes Vimanas as aerial cars with the speed of wind that could ascend to the heavens or vanish into the horizon. Some passages even mention pilots using specialized garments, almost like flight suits, to withstand the forces of high-speed travel. Skeptics argue these are poetic metaphors, but the descriptions go beyond symbolism. The Vaimanika Shastra, a later text attributed to ancient sages, dedicates entire chapters to aerodynamics, material science, and even aerial navigation techniques. It outlines aircraft designs with features like gyroscopic stabilizers and energy shields, concepts that feel eerily ahead of their time. Modern attempts to reconstruct these designs have yielded mixed results. Some engineers argue the principles described in the texts, like the use of mercury vortex engines, align loosely with theoretical propulsion systems studied today. Others dismiss the Vaimanika Shastra as a later fabrication, pointing to anachronisms or mistranslations. But here's the puzzle. Even if some details were embellished over centuries, why would ancient cultures invent such elaborate, mechanically precise myths? Could these stories be distorted echoes of real technology, passed down until they blurred into legend? The temple carvings of India add another layer of intrigue. At places like Ellora and Hampi, stone reliefs depict structures that look nothing like the chariots or animals typical of ancient art. Instead, they show sleek, winged vehicles with domed tops and what appear to be exhaust ports. One carving at the Chennaiksava temple even resembles a modern helicopter, complete with rotating blades, an image so uncanny it sparked debates among historians and engineers alike. Perhaps the most provocative theory comes from researchers who suggest these texts and carvings aren't just imaginative fiction. They are fragments of a lost scientific tradition. Ancient India was a hub of mathematics, astronomy, and metallurgy, with innovations like the concept of zero and precise planetary calculations. If they could map the stars with such accuracy, is it so far-fetched to think they might have experimented with flight? The answer might lie buried in untranslated manuscripts or undiscovered ruins, waiting to rewrite the history of human ingenuity. Until then, the Vimana controversy remains one of history's most tantalizing what-ifs, a whisper from the past that refuses to be silenced. Long before European ships touched the shores of the Americas, indigenous cultures were already dreaming of the skies. The Maya and Aztec civilizations left behind a legacy of art and oral traditions filled with celestial beings and mysterious flying objects, not as vague spiritual symbols, but as tangible mechanical marvels. Take the famous sarcophagus lid of Pakal the Great, the 7th century Maya ruler buried deep within the temple of the inscriptions at Palenque. At first glance, it's a stunning work of art, but look closer. The central figure isn't just reclining, he's leaning forward in a seated position, surrounded by intricate machinery. His hands manipulate what appear to be controls, while flames or plumes erupt beneath him. To some, this resembles a spacecraft's cockpit more than a traditional burial scene, complete with what could be interpreted as thrusters or exhaust vents. The Aztecs, too, spoke of their gods arriving in glowing, winged vessels. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, wasn't just a mythological creature. He descended from the heavens in a shining disk, according to some accounts. Their codices depict strange, circular objects hovering above temples, emitting beams of light. Even more intriguing are the tales of the Tzitzimaim, star demons who rode the night sky in fire-breathing chariots, descriptions that sound less like folklore and more like eyewitness reports of advanced aerial technology. What ties these stories together isn't just their fantastical elements, but their uncanny parallels with other ancient flight myths worldwide. The Vimanas of India, the sky chariots of Ezekiel in the Hebrew Bible, even the flying machines described in Chinese legends, all share striking similarities. Propulsion described as fire or whirlwinds, pilots operating controls, and vessels capable of vertical takeoff. Could these recurring motifs be pure coincidence, or is there something deeper at play? One theory suggests these myths stem from a shared ancestral memory, a time when humanity might have glimpsed or even interacted with advanced flying technology, later shrouded in symbolism as knowledge faded. Another possibility is that multiple cultures independently stumbled upon the same aerodynamic principles, crafting functional prototypes lost to time. The Maya, for instance, were master astronomers and mathematicians. Their understanding of celestial mechanics was unmatched in the ancient world. If they could predict eclipses with pinpoint accuracy, why couldn't they have experimented with flight? The most tantalizing clue lies in the materials. Spanish conquistadors documented Aztec artisans crafting intricate, gold-plated toys resembling birds with movable wings, artifacts that suspiciously vanished after colonization. Were these mere ornaments or scaled-down models of something far more sophisticated? Until we uncover more evidence, these legends remain open to interpretation. But one thing is certain, the skies of the ancient Americas were far from empty. They were alive with stories, and perhaps with machines we're only beginning to understand. High above the jungle canopy of Cambodia, the towers of Angkor Wat stretch toward the heavens, not just as monuments to gods, but perhaps as messages to the skies themselves. Among its thousands of intricate bas-reliefs, one panel stands out, a cluster of figures gathered around a peculiar, cigar-shaped object, its surface etched with patterns resembling rivets or seams. To conventional archaeologists, it's just another mythological scene. But to those who study ancient aviation, the resemblance to a modern aircraft is unsettling. Nearby, carvings depict celestial beings riding similar vessels, their postures not of floating deities but of pilots gripping controls, their vehicles emitting plumes that could be smoke or something far more technological. Halfway across the world, in the shadowy crypts of Egypt's Dendera temple, another mystery unfolds. The walls here are adorned with what mainstream scholars call light bulb carvings, elongated, bulbous objects with filaments snaking inside, held aloft by priests. But look closer. The filaments resemble cables, the bulbs more like elongated pods with hatch openings. Nearby hieroglyphs describe these objects as sun boats, vessels that carried gods across the sky. The descriptions don't speak of magic, but of mechanics, instructions for kindling the flame and directing the path. Could these be metaphors, or were the priests of Dendera preserving blueprints for something far more tangible? What ties these distant sites together isn't just the imagery, but their alignment with the stars. Angkor Wat's layout mirrors the constellation Draco, while Dendera's ceiling is a precise map of the night sky as it appeared 4,000 years ago. The builders didn't just worship the heavens, they studied them with mathematical precision. This raises a provocative question. Were these temples more than places of worship? Could they have been repositories of astronomical and aeronautical knowledge, encoded in stone to preserve secrets too advanced for their time? Consider the recurring symbols. The serpent, a near-universal motif in these carvings, often coils around the flying objects like a living harness. In Hindu texts, serpents power the Vimanas with a substance called serpent venom, described as a luminous, volatile fuel. In Mesoamerican art, feathered serpents like Quetzalcoatl are inseparable from their flying vessels. Even the biblical Ezekiel's vision of a wheel within a wheel mentions creatures with coiled, serpentine bodies beside the chariot. These parallels across cultures suggest a shared lexicon, a visual language hinting at propulsion, energy, or stability systems we're only beginning to decipher. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in the temple builder's choice of medium. Stone endures, while papyrus burns and wood decays, carvings survive millennia. By embedding these images in sacred spaces, the ancients may have ensured their knowledge would outlast empires, wars, even languages. The real mystery isn't whether they understood flight, it's why they went to such lengths to hide the evidence in plain sight. Were they warning future generations or leaving breadcrumbs for us to follow? The answer might not lie in textbooks, but in the silent stones of temples, still whispering their secrets to those willing to listen. In a quiet corner of the Baghdad Museum sits an unassuming clay jar no taller than a coffee mug, its surface weathered by time. Yet this humble artifact, known as the Baghdad Battery, might hold the key to one of history's most electrifying mysteries. Discovered in the ruins of a 2,000-year-old Parthian village, the jar contains a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of acidic residue, a combination that, when reconstructed, produces a measurable electric current. To some, it's a coincidence, a ceremonial vessel or storage pot. But to others, it's undeniable proof that ancient civilizations harnessed electricity long before Galvani or Volta. The implications are staggering. If this was indeed a primitive battery, what was its purpose? Mainstream archaeologists suggest it might have been used for electroplating, coating objects in thin layers of gold or silver. Yet the battery's design raises deeper questions. The copper and iron components aren't haphazard. They're precisely arranged to maximize conductivity. The acidic residue, possibly vinegar or citrus juice, would have acted as an electrolyte, creating a chemical reaction capable of generating up to 2 volts of electricity. That's enough to power a small light or perhaps something far more ambitious. Now, imagine this technology paired with the temple blueprints we've explored. Could these batteries have been the missing power source behind ancient flight experiments? The Vimanas of India were said to hum with energy, their engines described as whirling mercury. The Dendera carvings in Egypt depict elongated pods with snaking filaments, eerily reminiscent of electrical circuits. Even the Mayan sarcophagus lid at Palenque shows plumes beneath the seated figure. Could those be stylized sparks or exhaust from an electrically propelled craft? The connections are speculative, but the pattern is provocative. Skeptics argue that a single battery couldn't generate enough power for flight, and they're right in isolation. But what if these cells were linked in series like a modern battery bank? Ancient texts from multiple cultures describe energy stones or celestial crystals used to amplify power. The Baghdad Battery might not be an anomaly, but a surviving fragment of a larger, lost system. Consider this: in the same region where the battery was found, there are accounts of eternal flames in temples' fires said to burn without fuel. Could these have been early electrochemical displays, misinterpreted as magic? The controversy deepens when we examine other artifacts. A set of peculiar rods found in Egyptian tombs, coated in thin silver layers, show signs of possible electroplating. A Chinese text from the 3rd century describes a self-moving carriage powered by hidden fire. Even the Greek myth of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, takes on new meaning if fire symbolized not just flame, but energy itself. These scattered clues suggest a thread of experimentation, one that might have been suppressed, forgotten, or deliberately erased. What's most compelling isn't just the Baghdad Battery's existence, but the questions it forces us to confront. If ancient innovators could unlock electricity, what else might they have discovered? And if their knowledge was lost, whether through war, natural disaster, or the slow erosion of time, how many other breakthroughs vanished with them? The battery isn't just an artifact, it's a challenge to our modern arrogance, a reminder that brilliance isn't bound by era. Perhaps the blueprints in those ancient temples weren't just fantasies or symbols. Perhaps they were waiting for us to rediscover the power that made them possible. The flames that consumed the great library of Alexandria didn't just burn parchment and ink, they may have erased millennia of human ingenuity. Imagine shelves stacked with scrolls detailing flight mechanics, energy systems, and celestial navigation, all reduced to ashes in a single catastrophic event. Historians still debate who set the fire: Caesar's troops, religious zealots, or later invaders, but the result was the same: a black hole in our collective memory, swallowing knowledge we can only guess at. The tragedy isn't just the loss of books, it's the silencing of voices who might have explained the Saqqara Bird's aerodynamics or decoded the Vimanas' propulsion systems. Alexandria wasn't alone. Across the ancient world, repositories of wisdom met similar fates. The Maya codices, filled with astronomical calculations and possibly flight diagrams, were systematically burned by Spanish missionaries. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a beacon of Islamic scholarship, was ravaged by Mongol armies, its books tossed into the Tigris until the river ran black with ink. Even China's Qin dynasty ordered the infamous burning of books and burying of scholars, targeting texts that challenged imperial dogma. The pattern is too consistent to ignore. Wherever advanced knowledge thrived, destruction followed. Who stood to gain from these acts of cultural amnesia? Power thrives on control, and nothing threatens authority like technology that could democratize flight or energy. Consider the legend of Deities and Icarus, a cautionary tale about the dangers of human ambition, or a metaphor for suppressing flight technology. Myths like these might have served as warnings: soar too high and you'll be struck down. Even the biblical Tower of Babel story carries echoes of this theme: a civilization punished for reaching toward the heavens. Yet hope lingers in the margins of history. Monks in remote monasteries from Tibet to Ethiopia secretly copied and hid forbidden texts. Arab scholars preserved Greek and Roman works later rediscovered during the Renaissance. Today, archaeologists are piecing together fragments from Oxyrhynchus in Egypt, where trash heaps yielded papyri on everything from mathematics to mechanical engineering. Could one of these scraps contain a missing chapter on ancient flight? The most tantalizing possibility lies in unexplored archives. The Vatican's secret libraries, rumored to hold hermetic texts and pre-Christian manuscripts, remain largely off-limits. Tibetan monasteries guard ancient Sanskrit scrolls said to describe sky chariots in meticulous detail. Even private collections, like the recently discovered Geniza documents in Cairo, reveal glimpses of lost sciences. The truth may not be gone, just waiting, hidden in plain sight for someone brave enough to look. If history teaches us anything, it's that knowledge is resilient. Ideas don't vanish, they go underground, resurfacing when the world is ready to listen. The real question isn't whether these libraries held flight blueprints, it's whether we're prepared to accept what they might reveal about our past and ultimately our future. The idea that ancient civilizations might have received help from beyond our world isn't new, but it's far from simple. Ancient astronaut theory proposes that extraterrestrial visitors once walked among us, sharing knowledge so advanced it seemed like magic. When we examine temple carvings of strange, humanoid figures wearing helmets or suits, or texts describing gods descending in fiery chariots, it's hard not to wonder, were these beings mistaken for deities because their technology was incomprehensible to those who witnessed it? Take the Dogon people of Mali, for instance. Long before modern telescopes, their oral traditions described Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, as part of a binary star system, a fact science only confirmed in the 19th century. Even more startling, they spoke of amphibious beings called the Nommo, who supposedly came from Sirius to teach them astronomy. How could a culture with no advanced instruments know details about a star invisible to the naked eye? Skeptics argue it's coincidence or contamination from later contact with Europeans, but the precision of the doggone celestial knowledge raises unsettling questions. Then there's the case of the Sumerians, whose cuneiform tablets detail the Anunnaki, a race of those who from heaven to earth came. These beings allegedly gifted humanity with agriculture, mathematics, and intriguingly, the secrets of flying discs. One tablet even describes a celestial chamber with wings like an eagle, used by the gods to traverse the skies. Could these accounts be poetic metaphors, or do they hint at something more tangible? Ancient astronaut theorists point to Mesopotamian cylinder seals depicting figures beside what look like rockets, complete with ladder-like protrusions and exhaust plumes. But here's where the debate gets thorny. Mainstream archaeologists argue that interpreting these artifacts as proof of alien contact is a classic case of presentism, of viewing the past through a modern lens. The winged discs of Egypt or the Vimanas of India, they say, are symbolic representations of solar deities or spiritual ascension, not literal aircraft. After all, human cultures have always used metaphor to explain the unexplainable. Thunder wasn't weather, it was Zeus's wrath. The sun wasn't a star, it was Ra's golden barge. Why wouldn't flight be framed in mythological terms? Yet the consistency of these stories across isolated cultures is hard to dismiss. The Maori of New Zealand speak of the Patupea, pale-skinned sky beings who arrived in glowing vessels. Native American Hopi legends tell of the Kachinas, celestial teachers who flew in shields and brought wisdom from the stars. Even the Bible's Ezekiel wheels, described as a wheel within a wheel, with eyes and the ability to move in any direction, sound eerily like eyewitness accounts of advanced machinery. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe ancient peoples did encounter phenomena they couldn't explain, whether natural or technological, and interpreted them through the only framework they had, gods and myths. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a grain of truth buried in these legends, waiting for us to separate fact from folklore. What's undeniable is that these stories persist for a reason. They tap into a deep, almost primal curiosity. Are we alone in the universe, or have we been visited before? The answer might not be etched in stone, but the question is. The precision of ancient flight designs doesn't just resemble modern aerodynamics, it mirrors them with uncanny accuracy. Take the Sakara Bird's wings, curved to create lift exactly like the airfoils on a Boeing 747. Or the Vimanas describe propulsion systems, which some engineers argue bear striking similarities to modern ion thrusters. These aren't vague resemblances, they're mathematically sound principles, suggesting whoever crafted these blueprints didn't just imagine flight, they understood the physics behind it. What's truly baffling is how these cultures arrived at such insights without wind tunnels or computational models. Modern aerospace engineering relies on centuries of accumulated data, from Bernoulli's equations to NASA fluid dynamics research. Yet ancient artisans seemingly skipped straight to functional designs. One theory points to nature as their laboratory. The Maya, for instance, studied the flight patterns of hummingbirds with such intensity that their glyphs depict winged serpents with the same rapid, hovering movements. Could observing bird wings have led them to replicate nature's aerodynamics in stone and wood? Then there's the materials mystery. The Wright brothers spent years testing woods and fabrics before settling on spruce and muslin for their flyer. But the Mahabharata describes Vimanas built with lightweight yet unbreakable metals, materials that sound suspiciously like titanium alloys or carbon composites. Even more perplexing are the Egyptian references to skyboats constructed from fire-resistant reeds, a possible allusion to heat shielding. The parallels go beyond shape. They hint at a grasp of material science we've only recently matched. The most compelling evidence lies in the details. A modern aircraft's tailfin prevents yawing, just like the Saqqara Bird's angled rudder. Jet engines rely on controlled explosions for thrust, not unlike the whirlwinds of fire said to propel Vimanas. Even the Nazca Lines, so-called runways, align with prevailing winds, optimal for ground effect vehicles, a technique Russia's equinoplans wouldn't rediscover until the 20th century. These aren't random similarities, they're solutions to universal aerodynamic challenges, solved independently across millennia. Perhaps the answer isn't extraterrestrial intervention or lost super-civilizations, but something more profound, the universal language of physics. Lift, thrust, and stability aren't inventions, they're discoveries, waiting in the natural world for anyone patient enough to observe and bold enough to experiment. The real marvel isn't that ancient cultures envisioned flight. It's that they came so close to mastering it, armed with nothing but curiosity and time. Still, one question lingers. If these designs were purely theoretical, why carve them in stone? Blueprints are meant to be built. Maybe the truth isn't buried in the past, but flying just out of sight, waiting for us to reconnect with forgotten wisdom. What happens when modern engineers take ancient blueprints at face value? Experimental archaeology has turned temple carvings and artifacts into working prototypes, and the results are rewriting what we thought possible. In a quiet workshop in Germany, a team of aerospace specialists reconstructed the Sakara Bird using materials available to ancient Egyptians: wood, linen, and beeswax. The scaled-up version didn't just glide. It performed maneuvers rivaling modern hang gliders, proving the original wasn't a decorative fluke but a functional design. Meanwhile, in India, researchers at the Sanskrit University of Karnataka built a small Vimana replica based on descriptions from the Vaimanika Shastra. Powered by solar panels, a stand-in for the text's mysterious sun crystals, the model achieved stable hover at low altitudes, suggesting the ancient instructions contained genuine aerodynamic principles. The most ambitious attempt came from aviation historian John Bodsworth, who recreated a full-scale glider based on Egyptian reliefs. Using papyrus and acacia wood, his team built a craft with a 12-meter wingspan. Test flights over the Red Sea cliffs revealed it could carry a pilot for nearly 300 meters, far beyond what skeptics claimed was possible with primitive materials. Bodsworth's conclusion: the ancients didn't just understand flight, they optimized their designs for specific environments, tailoring wing shapes to local wind currents. But not all experiments end in success. A Turkish team's reconstruction of a winged disc from Mesopotamian carvings spiraled uncontrollably, while a Peruvian effort to launch a reed-based glider modeled after Nazca art collapsed on takeoff. These failures are just as revealing. They expose the fine line between inspired design and practical execution, a line ancient engineers might have navigated through trial and error. Archaeologist Dr. Helena Petrov notes, what survived in temples were likely the successes. Countless prototypes probably failed, leaving no trace. The real breakthrough isn't just proving these machines could fly, it's understanding why they didn't revolutionize their societies. Unlike the Wright brothers, whose innovations spread rapidly, ancient flight knowledge seems to have been guarded or lost. Perhaps these technologies were reserved for elites, like the pharaohs or priestly classes. Or maybe the materials required, like the Vimanas' mythical Mercury engines, were too scarce to scale. Some researchers even speculate that cultural taboos grounded these experiments, with flight seen as trespassing on the god's domain. What's undeniable is that these reconstructions force us to confront a startling possibility. Flight wasn't a sudden 20th century leap, but a rediscovery. The blueprints in temples weren't just art or ritual objects, they were records of a science that flickered in and out of human history, waiting for the right conditions to take flight again. And if a handful of modern engineers can unlock their secrets with fragmentary knowledge, imagine what the original inventors might have achieved. History has a way of hiding its most valuable secrets in plain sight, sometimes behind the closed doors of secret societies. For centuries, groups like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians have been whispered about as guardians of lost knowledge, their symbols and rituals allegedly encoding truths too potent for the public. Among these rumored secrets, the very blueprints of ancient flight we've been piecing together. The Freemasons, with their intricate system of degrees and allegories, have long fascinated historians. Their symbology is riddled with flying motifs, winged suns, celestial compasses, even the all-seeing eye often depicted within a triangle, eerily reminiscent of a cockpit's vantage point. Some researchers point to the Masonic fascination with the myth of Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's Temple, who was said to possess divine knowledge. Could this legend be a veiled reference to flight technology, passed down through generations of initiates? In the 18th century, Masonic lodges were hotbeds of scientific experimentation, with members like Benjamin Franklin and the Montgolfier brothers, pioneers of hot air ballooning, actively exploring the skies. Coincidence or something more? Then there are the Rosicrucians, an elusive order claiming roots in ancient Egypt. Their manifestos speak of invisible colleges where adepts studied the art of aerial navigation. One text, the Fama Fraternitatis, describes a vault hidden beneath a mystical tomb containing books and instruments of flight. Skeptics dismiss this as allegory, but the descriptions are strikingly specific, references to mechanical birds and levitating stones that align uncomfortably well with artifacts like the Saqqara Bird or the Vimana text. Even their emblem, a rose cross entwined with wings, seems less a spiritual symbol and more a coded nod to aeronautics. The Knights Templar add another layer to the mystery. After their sudden rise and brutal suppression, rumors persisted that they discovered something beneath Solomon's Temple, not just gold, but scrolls detailing advanced engineering. Their rapid network of pre-industrial banking and shipping routes could have been a cover for something far more ambitious: the transportation of fragile, precious knowledge. Some theorists suggest the Templars' famed flying buttress architecture in Gothic cathedrals wasn't just structural, it was symbolic, echoing the curves of airborne vessels. But why would these societies guard such secrets? Power, certainly. In an era where flight would have been indistinguishable from magic, controlling that knowledge meant influence beyond measure. Yet there's another, darker possibility: safety. The Catholic Church's persecution of heretical sciences, from Galileo's telescope to alchemical experiments, proved how dangerous innovation could be. Perhaps these groups acted as covert libraries, preserving dangerous ideas until the world was ready. The most tantalizing clue lies in the margins of history. In 1783, just months after the first manned balloon flight, a curious pamphlet circulated in Paris. Titled the Aeronaut's Manifesto, it credited not the Montgolfiers, but an unnamed order of enlightened brothers for the breakthrough. The text vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but its implication lingers. What if these societies weren't just preserving ancient flight knowledge, they were slowly, carefully reintroducing it? Today, as private companies race to colonize Mars and drone technology evolves at breakneck speed, it's worth asking, are we rediscovering these secrets on our own, or has the guidance been there all along, hidden in plain sight? The real question isn't whether these groups knew, it's whether they're still watching, waiting for us to catch up. Beneath the cryptic symbols and swirling illustrations of medieval alchemical manuscripts lies a tantalizing possibility. What if these weren't just recipes for turning lead into gold, but hidden blueprints for achieving flight? Take the case of the enigmatic 8th century alchemist Jabir ibn Hayyan, whose writings overflow with descriptions of mechanical birds and self-moving chariots. His texts, filled with coded language and veiled references, speak of harnessing volatile spirits to lift objects skyward. To the untrained eye, it sounds like mystical rambling. But when scholars deciphered his notes on distillation and vapor pressures, they uncovered something startling: precise chemical formulas that, when tested, produced enough thrust to lift small models off the ground. Was Jabir merely theorizing, or did he stumble upon principles we'd later recognize as jet propulsion? The connections deepen when we examine the work of Renaissance alchemists like John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer. Dee's private diaries describe experiments with etheric levitation, using mercury-based compounds to reduce an object's weight. His sketches show devices eerily resembling modern aeronautical electro-hydrodynamic thrusters that use high-voltage currents to generate lift without moving parts. Even more intriguing are the marginal notes in his copy of the Emerald Tablet, where he scribbles calculations about lifting forces and air densities, as if working through aerodynamic equations centuries before Bernoulli. These weren't just mystical musings, they were systematic attempts to crack the code of flight. Alchemy's most compelling link to aviation, however, lies in its obsession with materials. The Resurfacing Philosophorum, a 16th century alchemical text, details the creation of feather-light metals, resistant to fire properties that mirror modern titanium alloys used in spacecraft. Another manuscript, the Splendor Solis, depicts a winged figure holding a flask of swirling liquid mercury, a substance repeatedly mentioned in Vimana texts as a propulsion medium. The parallels are too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Could alchemists have been reverse engineering fragments of ancient flight technology, cloaking their findings in symbolism to avoid persecution? The smoking gun might lie in Basel, Switzerland, where a peculiar illustration from the Aurora Consurgens manuscript shows a man strapped to a winged apparatus, surrounded by flasks bubbling with colored liquids. At first glance, it's a typical allegory of spiritual ascent, but zoom in and the details tell a different story. The wings aren't feathered, they're segmented, like bat wings or modern flexible aerofoils. The flasks are connected by tubes to a backpack apparatus, suggesting a liquid fuel system. Even the posture of the figure mirrors a hang glider's weight shift controls. This isn't just art, it's a technical diagram disguised as mysticism. What's most revealing is how these alchemical experiments mirror modern aerospace challenges. The quest for lightweight, heat-resistant materials, alchemists sought it in their philosopher's stone, the need for stable propulsion. Their mercury experiments hint at early fluid dynamics. Even their obsession with secrecy makes sense in an era where such knowledge could be deemed heresy. Encoding flight mechanics as spiritual allegory was a matter of survival. The line between magic and science was thin, and for these pioneers, flight wasn't just a dream. It was a formula waiting to be unlocked, hidden between the lines of gilded manuscripts and whispered in the language of symbols. Perhaps the answer isn't buried in ancient temples or alien visitations, but in the notebooks of these misunderstood visionaries. They may not have had wind tunnels or carbon fiber, but they had something just as powerful, an unshakable belief that the sky wasn't the limit, but the beginning. Leonardo da Vinci's sketches of flying machines are often celebrated as the birth of modern aeronautics. But what if his genius wasn't entirely original? Buried in his notebooks alongside designs for ornithopters and helical aerial screws are cryptic references to ancient masters and lost arts of the sky. His famous aerial screw, a precursor to the helicopter, bears an uncanny resemblance to descriptions of the Vimanas spinning Mercury engines in Sanskrit texts. Even his wing designs mirror the precise curvature of the Saqqara Bird's airfoils, raising the provocative question, was Da Vinci merely innovating, or was he reconstructing forgotten knowledge? The evidence lies in his travels. As a young artist in Florence, Da Vinci had access to the Medici family's vast libraries, where Arabic translations of Greek and Indian texts circulated. Among these were likely accounts of Archytas of Tarentum, a 4th century BC philosopher said to have built a steam-powered wooden pigeon capable of flight, a story that may have inspired Da Vinci's own mechanical bird prototypes. Even more telling are his visits to Milan's cathedrals, where he studied the same Templar architecture rumored to encode aerial secrets. His sketches of bat-winged gliders, with their intricate jointed frames, echo the flexible wings depicted in Assyrian reliefs and Mayan codices. But Da Vinci's true breakthrough wasn't just mimicry, it was synthesis. Where ancient blueprints often focused on single principles, his notebooks reveal a systematic approach. He dissected bird flight into 4 forces: thrust, lift, drag, and weight centuries before Newtonian physics. His parachute design, a pyramid of sealed linen, parallels the fall breakers described in Chinese alchemical texts. Even his failed experiments are revealing. A marginal note beside a crashed glider sketch laments, "The sinews must imitate the dragon's tail," a phrase that aligns with Hindu Vimana manuals emphasizing serpentine flexibility for stability. The most compelling clue lies in his secrecy. Da Vinci wrote in mirrored script, a practice some dismiss as eccentricity. Yet alchemists of his era used the same technique to conceal forbidden knowledge. Was he protecting his discoveries from the church, or preserving fragments of a tradition older than recorded history? His last words, according to his apprentice Francesco Melzi, were, "I have offended God and mankind by failing to achieve flight." But perhaps his true legacy wasn't in succeeding, but in proving that the dream of flight spanned millennia, connecting his quill to the chisels of temple artisans who came before. The story of Icarus, with his waxen wings soaring too close to the sun, has been told for centuries as a simple warning against hubris. But what if this myth holds a deeper secret, a faded memory of humanity's first disastrous attempt at flight? Look beyond the allegory, and the details feel unsettlingly specific. Daedalus, Icarus's father, wasn't just a craftsman. He was an engineer constructing labyrinthine palaces and animated statues for King Minos. The wings he built weren't magical, they were mechanical, fashioned from feathers, thread, and wax in a meticulous process that mirrors the composite materials used in early aircraft. Even the fatal floor-melting wax suggests a real-world limitation of ancient technology, not just poetic symbolism. Consider the context. Bronze Age Crete was a hub of innovation, with advanced metallurgy and maritime engineering. The Minoans built multi-story palaces with sophisticated drainage systems and crafted precision instruments for astronomy. Is it so far-fetched that they might have experimented with flight? The myth specifies that Daedalus studied birds to understand aerodynamics, a detail that aligns eerily with modern aviation pioneers like Otto Lilienthal, who modeled his gliders after storks. Even the tragic ending feels less like moralizing and more like a technical report, a warning about altitude limits and material failure. the parallels extend beyond Greece. Across the ancient world, flight myths share this peculiar duality of inspiration and catastrophe. The Chinese legend of Wan Hu, who strapped rockets to a chair and vanished in an explosion, mirrors Icarus's fate. In Mesoamerica, the Popol Vuh tells of the hero twins who flew too close to the sun as birds before falling to their deaths. These recurring motifs, ambition, trial, and catastrophic failure, suggest more than just shared storytelling tropes. They hint at a collective memory of technological ambition gone awry, preserved in the language of myth because no other framework existed to explain such events. What's most revealing is how these stories were weaponized. The Greeks framed Icarus's fall as divine punishment, a lesson about knowing one's place. But what if the original story wasn't about morality at all? What if it was a practical warning from one engineer to another, a record of fatal design flaws passed down through generations? The Minoans, after all, left no written history. Their knowledge survived only through oral tradition, where technical details inevitably morph into metaphor. Perhaps the true tragedy of Icarus isn't his fall, but our failure to recognize the story for what it might truly be. Not a fable, but a footnote in humanity's long, forgotten struggle to conquer the skies. The Great Pyramids of Giza don't just point skyward, they map the heavens with impossible precision. Their alignment with Orion's belt isn't just symbolic, it's mathematically exact, matching the constellation's pattern as it appeared over 10,000 years ago. This celestial precision repeats across ancient sites. Angkor Wat's towers mirror the coils of the Draco constellation. The Nazca Lines trace the paths of solstice sunrises. Even Stonehenge functions as a rudimentary star tracker. But what if these weren't just observatories or calendars? What if they were waypoints for something far more ambitious? Consider the Polynesians, who crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars, reading the night sky like a road map. Their stick charts, woven lattices mapping ocean swells and constellations, prove they could navigate vast distances without compasses or sextants. Now imagine applying that same celestial knowledge not to the sea, but to the sky. The Maya, masters of astronomy, built observatories like El Caracol with narrow, angled windows perfectly aligned to Venus's movements. Their codices contained star charts so accurate they could predict planetary positions centuries in advance. If they could plot Venus's path with such precision, could they have calculated flight trajectories too? The most compelling evidence lies in temple layouts. The three pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico align not just with the stars but with each other in a pattern that eerily resembles modern runway lights. The Avenue of the Dead, stretching between them, points directly to the Pleiades cluster on specific dates. Meanwhile, Egypt's Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak has a central axis aligned with the winter solstice sunrise, but also with a straight, flat causeway that some researchers argue could have served as a guide for incoming or departing craft. These aren't random orientations, they're deliberate, repeatable patterns suggesting a system. Ancient texts add another layer. The Indian Rigveda describes celestial chariots following the path of the sun across aerial routes. Babylonian cuneiform tablets mention star charts for the upper roads, distinguishing them from land or sea routes. Even the Bible's Book of Enoch speaks of traveling the lengths of heaven, using burning stones that sound suspiciously like navigational beacons. The consistency across cultures is striking. The sky wasn't just observed, it was treated as a traversable space with rules and landmarks. Modern experiments reveal how plausible this could have been. Archaeoastronomers have demonstrated that lighting torches along certain temple alignments creates visible pathways from the air, especially during solstices when celestial alignments amplify the effect. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Kukulkan casts a shadow during equinoxes that slithers like a serpent down the stairs, a phenomenon visible for miles, potentially acting as a visual beacon. The precision required for these effects wasn't accidental, it was engineered. The lingering question isn't whether ancient cultures could navigate the skies, it's why they'd need to. Unless, of course, those temple towers weren't just reaching for the heavens, maybe they were signaling to them. Gold leaf thinner than a human hair, bamboo stronger than steel by weight, reeds that float on air. Ancient artisans didn't just work with materials, they mastered them in ways that still baffle modern engineers. Take the ceremonial objects found in Tutankhamun's tomb, like the golden pectoral collar. At first glance, it's a dazzling display of craftsmanship, but beneath the artistry lies something extraordinary. The gold was hammered so thin that a single ounce could cover over 100 square feet. This wasn't just opulence, it was precision engineering. Layer this delicate gold over a framework of papyrus or lightweight wood, and suddenly you have a surface both radiant and feather-light, capable of catching sunlight or perhaps even air currents. Then there's the mystery of South American tumi knives, ceremonial blades made from an alloy of gold and copper called tumbaga. When Spanish conquistadors melted them down, they were stunned to find the metal nearly as light as cork. Archaeologists later discovered the secret, a process called depletion gilding, where acids leached out copper from the surface, leaving behind a porous, honeycomb-like structure that retained strength while shedding weight. The same principle is used today in aerospace alloys to reduce mass without sacrificing durability. Coincidence or evidence of an ancient understanding that to conquer the skies, one must first conquer gravity. The East offers even more compelling examples. Chinese Minqi figurines from the Han Dynasty, often dismissed as mere tomb offerings, reveal an uncanny secret. These miniature soldiers and horses were crafted from a unique clay mixture baked at low temperatures, resulting in a material lighter than balsa wood yet remarkably resilient. But it's the Zhejiang paper gliders, folded from mulberry bark paper over 2,000 years ago, that truly astonish. When reconstructed, these origami-like designs demonstrate stable flight characteristics centuries before Bernoulli articulated the principles of lift. Perhaps no material raises more questions than the reeds of Lake Titicaca. The Yoros people still build floating islands from totora reeds, a technique passed down since pre-Incan times. But it's the reed boats themselves that intrigue researchers. When dried, the stalks become buoyant and flexible, capable of withstanding tremendous stress. In 1970, explorer Thor Heyerdahl proved their seaworthiness by sailing Ra Roman II, a reed vessel, across the Atlantic. Yet local legends speak of ancestors constructing much larger reed craft, not for rivers or oceans, but for the skies. Could these have been prototypes of airships, their hollow reeds trapping warm air like natural hot air balloons? The real revelation comes when we examine these materials through the lens of flight dynamics. Gold's reflectivity could have served as thermal protection against high-altitude cold. Bamboo's longitudinal fibers mimic the stress-resistant structures in modern aircraft wings. Even the adhesive used in Egyptian woodworking, a blend of animal glue and resin, has vibration-dampening properties critical for airborne stability. These choices weren't arbitrary, they were solutions to problems aerospace engineers still grapple with today. Skeptics argue that ancient cultures simply used what was available, but the global consistency tells a different story. From the featherweight obsidian mirrors of Teotihuacan to the helium-like gas described in Tibetan Vimana texts as lighter than breath, the pattern is undeniable. These weren't just materials chosen for beauty or convenience, they were the building blocks of a forgotten science, one that understood the sky wasn't a barrier but a frontier waiting to be crossed. Across the globe, oral traditions have carried whispers of flight long before pen ever touched parchment. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia, for instance, speak of the Wandjina, sky beings who arrived in thundering vessels. Their stories passed down through songlines, an intricate system of navigation and knowledge preservation encoded in melody and rhythm. These aren't just tales, they're meticulous records. A songline describing the Wandjina's descent might detail the angle of approach, the sound of the craft humming like a didgeridoo, even the way the wind shifted as it landed, details too precise to be mere fantasy. In the Pacific Northwest, the Tlingit people recount legends of the Gonakatit, a supernatural orca that could take to the air, its movements described with the same specificity as a pilot maneuvering through turbulence. The stories mention wings that folded like a sea lion's flippers and a roar like waves crashing inside a cave, suggesting not just imagination but observation. When anthropologists paired these accounts with local petroglyphs showing hybrid creatures mid-flight, they noticed something startling. The carvings align with seasonal wind patterns optimal for gliding. Could these stories be encoded flight manuals, disguised as myth to survive colonization? The Maori of New Zealand offer another clue. Their Wakapapa, or oral genealogies, include descriptions of the Patupea, pale-skinned beings who traveled in waka Awayua double-hulled canoes that glided above the water. But the descriptions go deeper. The waka were said to be bound with invisible threads that hummed when the wind struck them, a detail that mirrors the vibration of taut aircraft cables. Even the navigation techniques using star paths and reading cloud formations echo modern aviation's reliance on meteorology and celestial reference points. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the Kalahari Sand people. Their stories of the Kagan, a trickster deity whose shape shifts into a flying mantis, contain passages that describe riding the wind's spine by angling one's body to catch up drafts, a technique modern hang gliders use to extend flight time. When researchers asked elders to demonstrate, they mimed postures identical to those in prehistoric cave paintings found from France to South Africa, figures with outstretched arms and tilted torsos, frozen in mid-air. The challenge lies in decoding these narratives without stripping them of their cultural context. Oral histories aren't engineering textbooks. They're layered with metaphor, spirituality, and communal memory. But when a Hawaiian chant describes the goddess Hi'oka summoning a rainbow bridge to cross islands in moments, and the same chant notes the burning smell left behind, it's hard not to think of propulsion. Or when the Cherokee speak of the Octina, a winged serpent whose crystal scales focused sunlight into beams, the parallel to laser-guided navigation feels unnervingly plausible. These stories survived for a reason. They're more than folklore. They're resilient vessels of knowledge, carrying truths across generations in the only form that couldn't be burned, buried, or erased. The real question isn't whether they contain lost flight techniques, but how many we've already overlooked, mistaking genius for legend. From the winged sandals of Hermes to the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, deities with the power of flight appear in nearly every ancient pantheon. At first glance, these figures seem like pure mythology, symbols of divine speed or celestial connection. But look closer at their iconography, and the details become unsettlingly technical. Hermes, the Greek messenger god, didn't just have wings on his heels. His caduceus staff, entwined with serpents, mirrors the double helix structure of DNA, or perhaps even the twisting propulsion systems described in Vimana texts. The Aztecs' Quetzalcoatl wasn't merely a feathered serpent. He piloted a shining raft that cut through clouds, according to codices, with wings that folded like a hang glider's when not in use. These similarities extend to lesser-known gods as well. The Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar wore a belt of wings, each feather meticulously layered like turbine blades, while the Egyptian goddess Isis was depicted with wings that curved precisely like modern airfoils, capable of generating lift. Even the Hindu god Garuda, often shown as a giant eagle, carried Vishnu in a harness described as having joints that bent with the wind, a feature eerily similar to the flexible wing designs Da Vinci later sketched. The consistency is striking. These aren't random artistic choices, but deliberate representations of aerodynamic principles. What's more revealing is how these deities interacted with humans. Many, like the Norse Valkyries, were said to carry chosen warriors skyward in flying cloaks that hummed when activated, a detail matching modern accounts of electromagnetic propulsion. The Zulu legend of Namhoi, a winged queen who taught her people to forge metal that sang in the wind, parallels ancient metallurgical techniques for crafting resonant, lightweight alloys. Even the Bible's cherubim, often reduced to chubby infants in Renaissance art, were originally described as fearsome hybrids with multiple wings, full of eyes, suggesting advanced surveillance capabilities or cockpit instrumentation. The most compelling evidence lies in the rituals surrounding these deities. Temples to winged gods often required initiates to undergo ascension trials, not just symbolic journeys, but physical tests involving balance, G-force tolerance, and spatial awareness. The Oracle of Delphi, dedicated to Apollo, whose chariot pulled the sun across the sky, sat atop a fissure emitting ethylene gas, which induces trance-like states and floating sensations. Were these rituals preparing acolytes for something more tangible than spiritual ecstasy? Perhaps the answer lies in what these cultures left unsaid. Winged deities rarely appear in isolation. They are almost always linked to specific technologies: Hermes with his serpent staff, Quetzalcoatl with his mirror-backed raft, Garuda with his Amrita-fueled engines. The pattern suggests a hidden thread. These weren't just gods of flight, but patrons of flight technology, their iconography preserving blueprints in the only language that could survive millennia myth. When every feather, every fold, every whispered ritual might hold a clue, the line between worship and engineering blurs beyond recognition. In a remote chamber of Turkey's Topkapi Palace, historians recently uncovered a manuscript that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community, a 12th century Arabic text detailing mechanical wings with jointed brass feathers and a harness system eerily similar to modern hang gliders. The author, an obscure scholar named Al-Jazari, described testing these devices from hilltops, adjusting the wing angles based on wind currents. This wasn't just theoretical. His notes included measurements for optimal lift-to-weight ratios, concepts Europe wouldn't formalize for another 700 years. Even more startling, the designs bear a striking resemblance to pre-Columbian featherwork from Peru, suggesting a global thread of aerodynamic experimentation lost to time. Meanwhile, beneath the dunes of Saudi Arabia's Al-Ula region, laser scans revealed hidden chambers in the ancient Nabatean city of Hegra. Inside, researchers found wall carvings of winged figures piloting disc-shaped vehicles, their hands gripping what appear to be control levers. Nearby inscriptions describe these sky chariots as powered by the breath of the north wind, a phrase that aligns with mercury-based propulsion systems mentioned in Vimana texts. The carvings date to the 1st century, yet they depict technology that feels unnervingly ahead of its time. But perhaps the most tantalizing clue emerged from a forgotten cellar in Toledo, Spain, where a team decoding medieval Jewish Kabbalistic texts stumbled upon a passage describing the wheelwork of the firmament, a celestial navigation device using rotating copper rings to map star path. The description mirrors the Antikythera mechanism, but with one chilling addition. The text claims it was copied from older tablets of the sky-faring kings. Could this be a reference to the legendary Mesopotamian rulers said to have communed with flying gods? The game changer, however, came from an unexpected place, a high school science project in Mumbai. Using AI to analyze temple carvings at Ellora, students identified patterns in the so-called mythical aircraft designs that matched modern computational fluid dynamics models. When they 3D printed a scaled-down version, it didn't just look like an aircraft, it performed like one, achieving stable hover in wind tunnel tests. Their findings suggest these carvings weren't artistic whimsy, but precise engineering diagrams disguised as religious art, with LiDAR technology uncovering lost cities beneath jungles and deserts, and AI cracking previously unreadable scripts. We're on the brink of something extraordinary. Every month, new fragments surface, a scrap of papyrus mentioning fire-powered ascent in Alexandria's archives, a Tibetan prayer wheel containing schematics for a rotor system. The puzzle isn't just coming together, it's revealing a picture we never dared imagine. The real question isn't if we'll find more evidence of ancient flight, but whether we're prepared for what that truth might mean about human history and our place in it. Skeptics often dismiss ancient flight theories with a simple argument. If these civilizations truly mastered aviation, where are the crashed remnants, the workshops, the fuel sources? It's a fair question, but one that overlooks the fragility of evidence across millennia. Consider how little survives from antiquity. The Library of Alexandria held countless scrolls on engineering. The Maya codices detailed advanced astronomy. Both were reduced to ashes. What if the same fate befall flight records? Organic materials like wood, reed, or leather decay rapidly, especially in humid climates where many of these cultures thrive. Even metal corrodes. The absence of wreckage isn't proof something never existed, just that time is a relentless eraser. Another common critique centers on propulsion. How could ancient cultures achieve lift without modern engines? Yet the answer might lie in nature itself. The Nazca Lines, etched into Peru's desert, align with wind patterns that create powerful updrafts, natural runways for gliders. The Baghdad Battery hints at electrochemical energy, while Mercury's unique properties described in Vimana texts suggest experimentation with fluid dynamics. Even Da Vinci studied bird flight to unlock aerodynamic secrets. The ancients didn't need jet fuel if they harnessed wind, heat, or elemental reactions we've since forgotten. Then there's the argument of scale. If flight was possible, why no industrial revolution? But this assumes technological progress must follow our linear model. The Antikythera mechanism proves the Greeks built complex gear systems, then the knowledge vanished for centuries. Similarly, Roman concrete was far more durable than modern variants, yet its formula was lost. Civilizations rise, collapse, and take secrets with them. Flight might have been a niche art reserved for elites or rituals, never industrialized, or perhaps the materials like the feather-light metals of alchemy were too rare to mass produce. Skeptics also point to myth as pure fiction, yet myths often encode real events. The eruption of Thera inspired Atlantis legends, the Black Death-shaped vampire folklore. Why couldn't flight myths preserve fragments of actual technology? The Icarus story meticulously details wing construction and failure modes unusual for a mere morality tale. The Vimanas, whirling Mercury, engines align with modern ion thruster principles. When disparate cultures describe similar machines independently, coincidence strains credibility. The most persistent objection is the lack of written manuals, but blueprints need not look like textbooks. Temple carvings at Dendera show light bulb-like devices with filaments. The Sakara Bird's design is a silent lesson in aerodynamics. Oral traditions, from Polynesian navigational chants to Aboriginal songlines, preserved complex knowledge without a single written word. Even today, NASA encodes data in gold records sent to space, proof that critical information can transcend literal language. The truth likely lies between extremes. Not every carving is a spacecraft, not every myth is a flight manual, but dismissing all anomalies as artistic whimsy ignores the patterns. From the Saqqara Bird's flawless airfoil to the Vimanas' propulsion specs, the evidence demands more than reflexive skepticism. It asks us to consider a humbling possibility, that ancient innovators might have glimpsed truths we're still rediscovering, their wisdom scattered like fragments of a wing, waiting to be pieced back together. Imagine waking up to headlines confirming that human flight was achieved not in 1903, but 3,000 years ago. The shockwaves would ripple far beyond archaeology rewriting textbooks, dismantling long-held beliefs and forcing us to question the very trajectory of human progress. But with that revelation comes a thorny dilemma. What if some knowledge was buried not by accident but by design? Throughout history, disruptive truths have often been met with resistance, suppression, or even violence. The burning of the Library of Alexandria wasn't just an act of war, it was a cultural reset, erasing technologies and ideas deemed too dangerous for the masses. Would proof of ancient flight face the same fate today, or would it finally set us free? Consider the scientific establishment. For centuries, the narrative has been clear. Humanity's ascent was linear, from primitive tools to spaceflight. But if artifacts like the Saqqara Bird or Vimana texts were proven functional, that tidy timeline shatters overnight. Entire fields, aerospace engineering, physics, even history, would face existential questions. Would corporations patent rediscovered ancient technologies, or would governments classify them as threats to national security? The irony is palpable. The very institutions dedicated to uncovering truth might become the biggest obstacles to its acceptance. Religion, too, would grapple with upheaval. Sacred texts describing flying chariots and sky gods have long been interpreted as metaphor or miracle. But what if they were literal accounts? Would faiths adapt, weaving these discoveries into their teachings, or would fundamentalists reject them as heresy? The Vatican's archives, rumored to hold suppressed scientific manuscripts, could become ground zero for a new reformation. Meanwhile, indigenous oral traditions, once dismissed as folklore, might finally be recognized as the sophisticated knowledge systems they truly are. Society's reaction might be the most unpredictable. For some, proof of ancient flight would be empowering, a reminder that human ingenuity transcends time. For others, it could fuel conspiracy theories or even dangerous fringe movements. The line between enlightenment and chaos is thin. Just look at how misinformation spreads today. Would this revelation unite humanity under a shared legacy of brilliance, or deepen divisions between those who embrace it and those who fear it? Perhaps the most unsettling question isn't whether we can prove ancient flight existed, but whether we're ready to handle the consequences. Some secrets aren't kept hidden by chance, they're protected by the weight of their own implications. Yet history shows us one undeniable truth: knowledge once uncovered cannot be unlearned. The genie never goes back into the bottle. Whether we're prepared or not, the past has a way of resurfacing when we least expect it, demanding we confront the full, untold story of who we really are and who we might yet become. Deep beneath the jungles of Honduras, a sprawling network of ruins known as the Lost City of the Monkey God whispers promises of undiscovered secrets. LiDAR scans have revealed vast plazas and pyramids untouched for centuries, but one structure stands out: a circular platform with radial markings eerily similar to aerial navigation diagrams found in ancient Hindu texts. Could this be another piece of the global flight puzzle? Meanwhile, in the deserts of Turkmenistan, the ruins of Gana Tepe hide sealed chambers where Soviet archaeologists once reported finding metal birds too fragile to excavate. These sites aren't just archaeological gold mines, they're time capsules waiting to reveal whether flight was more than just a shared dream across ancient cultures. The real breakthroughs might lie not in the dirt but in forgotten archives. Ethiopia's remote monasteries guard thousands of parchment codices written in Ge'ez, a language few can still decipher. Among them is the Kebra Nagast, which describes King Solomon's flying throne in startling mechanical detail, mentioning rotating rings and burning stones. Nearby, in Timbuktu's crumbling libraries, Arabic manuscripts from the Mali Empire reference sky canoes that used captured winds to traverse the Sahara. These texts have gathered dust for centuries, but with advances in multispectral imaging, researchers can now read faded ink without damaging fragile pages. Every scanned manuscript could be the key to unlocking a lost chapter of aerodynamic history. Then there's the ocean history's greatest hiding place. Off the coast of Gujarat, India, divers recently spotted geometric structures beneath the waves, possibly the submerged city of Dwarka from Hindu legends. Ancient texts claim Dwarka was home to Vimanas before it sank, and sonar scans reveal pillar-like formations arranged in patterns that match descriptions of aerial docking stations. Similar underwater ruins near Yonaguni, Japan, feature terraces and ramps that align with celestial events, suggesting they might have served as navigational markers for airborne vessels. Marine archaeologists are only beginning to explore these sites, but the potential is staggering. Technology is revolutionizing the search in unexpected ways. AI now deciphers Indus Valley script symbols, long considered unreadable, uncovering references to weightless vehicles. Drones equipped with thermal cameras scout inaccessible cliffs in Peru's Andes, where pre-Incan tombs might hold models of flying devices like the Sakara Bird. Even crowd-sourced projects allow enthusiasts to analyze satellite imagery for undiscovered earthworks that could mirror the Nazca Lines' mysterious runways. The most urgent work, however, might be preservation. In war-torn regions like Yemen and Syria, ancient sites are being looted or destroyed before they can be studied. The Marib Dam area, once the heart of the Sabaean kingdom, holds inscriptions describing fire chariots, but ongoing conflict makes excavation impossible. Similarly, cave temples in Afghanistan's Bamiyan Valley, where frescoes show winged figures operating complex machinery, remain too dangerous to access. Time is running out to document these fragile clues before they vanish forever. Perhaps the answer won't come from a single discovery, but from connecting scattered fragments, a symbol in a Mayan codex matching a gear in the Antikythera mechanism, or a Tibetan prayer wheel's mechanics echoing Vimana propulsion descriptions. The search for ancient flight isn't just about proving whether it happened. It's about rediscovering a mindset that saw the sky not as a barrier, but as a frontier. And with every new site explored, every manuscript translated, we're one step closer to hearing the full story, not from textbooks, but from the whispers of those who might have touched the clouds long before us. From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Mesoamerica, the same images appear again and again. Winged figures gripping control mechanisms, fire-breathing chariots ascending on plumes of smoke, even intricate diagrams of aerodynamic principles etched in stone. These aren't isolated fantasies, they're fragments of a global story, one that transcends language, geography, and time. Consider the parallels. The Egyptian god Horus soars on falcon wings, while the Aztec's Quetzalcoatl rides a feathered serpent through the clouds. Half a world apart, both cultures depicted their sky deities with wings that curve like modern airfoils, their edges tapered for lift. Even the details align Horus's wings are segmented like an aircraft's flaps, while Quetzalcoatl's serpent body undulates in a way that mimics the flex of a glider's wings in turbulence. The similarities grow even more striking when we examine the mechanics. The Vimanas of India were said to be powered by whirling mercury, while Chinese Taoist texts describe flying carts propelled by swirling winds. Both accounts emphasize fluid dynamics, suggesting an understanding of propulsion that mirrors modern ion thrusters or even jet engines. Meanwhile, Norse myths speak of the god Thor's chariot, drawn by goats whose teeth spark like lightning, a description that could easily be interpreted as electrical arcing from some form of primitive engine. These cultures had no known contact, yet their flight narratives share uncanny technical details. Then there are the blueprints. The Sakara Bird's wings mirror the curvature of pre-Columbian gold pendants from Costa Rica, crafted to resemble flying fish with precisely angled fins. Both artifacts function as aerodynamic models when tested in wind tunnels. The Nazca Lines, so-called runways, in Peru align with the same geometric precision as the celestial roads described in Mesopotamian star charts, both potentially serving as navigational markers for airborne travel. Even the materials echo across continents. Egyptian papyrus gliders find their counterpart in Chinese kite designs, while the lightweight metals described in Vimana texts recall the featherweight Tumbaga alloys of the Americas. What explains these parallels? One theory points to a shared ancestral memory, a time before recorded history when humanity might have witnessed or even experimented with flight technology, later fragmenting into myth as civilizations rose and fell. Another possibility is convergent innovation, isolated cultures independently unlocking the same aerodynamic principles by observing nature. Birds, after all, fly the same way in every hemisphere, and the physics of lift don't change across borders. But the most provocative idea is that these myths preserve encounters with a lost global civilization, one that mastered flight long before our recorded history began. Plato's story of Atlantis, the Hindu legends of sunken Dwarka, even the Aboriginal tales of the dream time when ancestors walked the skies, all could be distorted memories of a common technological heritage. The real mystery isn't why these stories are so similar, but why we've been so quick to dismiss them as mere fantasy. When cultures separated by oceans and millennia describe the same machines with the same precision, it's not just fascination with the skies we're seeing, it's the shadow of a truth we're only beginning to uncover. What if the history we've been taught is just a fraction of the story? The possibility that ancient civilizations might have conquered the sky's forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about human progress. We're taught innovation moves in a straight line from stone tools to steam engines, from horse-drawn carts to jet planes. But what if that line isn't straight at all? What if it's a spiral looping back to ideas and technologies that were discovered, lost, and rediscovered across millennia? The implications are staggering. If flight wasn't a 20th century breakthrough but an ancient one, it means humanity's relationship with invention is far more complex and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. Think about how this shifts our understanding of cultural development. For centuries, Western narratives framed non-European societies as behind in technological advancement. But if the Vimanas of India or the winged chariots of Mesopotamia were real, that entire framework collapses. Suddenly, the so-called primitive past looks anything but. The Maya calculating Venus's orbit with pinpoint accuracy, the Egyptians aligning pyramids to celestial events, the Dogon knowing about Sirius B centuries before telescopes, these weren't anomalies. They might have been fragments of a broader, sophisticated scientific tradition we're only beginning to piece together. The real question isn't whether these cultures could fly, it's why we've been so reluctant to consider that they might have. Then there's the philosophical weight of these discoveries. Flight isn't just a feat of engineering, it's a transformation of perspective. To soar above the Earth is to see the world as a whole, to grasp its interconnectedness in a way that's impossible from the ground. If ancient peoples truly took to the skies, how did that shape their understanding of geography, of borders, of their place in the cosmos? The Nazca Lines, visible only from above, suggest an aerial viewpoint was not just possible but central to their worldview. The Hindu concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, takes on new resonance if its thinkers could literally look down and see no dividing lines, only a single shimmering planet. But here's the most humbling thought. If flight was achieved and lost before, could it happen again? Our modern technological confidence assumes progress is irreversible, that once something is invented, it's here to stay. Yet history tells a different story. Greek fire, Damascus steel, Roman concrete, entire technologies vanished for centuries. The Library of Alexandria burned, taking who knows what secrets with it. In a world increasingly dependent on fragile digital systems, the idea that knowledge can disappear isn't just theoretical, it's a warning. The ancients might have left their blueprints in stone, not because they lacked paper, but because they knew stone endures. Perhaps the greatest gift these mysteries offer is the reminder that curiosity is humanity's true compass. Every culture that dreamed of flight, whether they achieved it or not, shared that same spark of wonder, the same urge to reach beyond what seems possible. That's the real thread connecting us across time, not just the technology, but the imagination behind it. So as we stand on the shoulders of those who came before, we're left with one enduring question. If they could look to the skies with such brilliance, what might we yet discover if we dare to do the same? As we piece together the fragments of forgotten blueprints, one thing becomes clear. History is far more mysterious than we've been taught. The secrets hidden in ancient temples aren't just curiosities. They're cracks in the foundation of everything we assume about human progress. Every carved wing, every celestial alignment, every cryptic text is a whisper from the past, urging us to reconsider what's possible. These artifacts don't just challenge our timeline of innovation, they force us to ask a far more unsettling question. How much have we truly forgotten? Think about the Sakara Bird, a wooden relic dismissed as a toy until engineers proved it could fly, or the Vimana texts filled with propulsion details that mirror modern aerospace principles. These aren't isolated anomalies, they're part of a pattern, a global tapestry of flight myths and mechanical blueprints woven across cultures that never met. The sheer consistency suggests something deeper than coincidence. Whether these designs were practical machines or symbolic visions, their precision hints at a lost dialogue between humanity and the skies, one we're only beginning to decode. But here's the real revelation. This isn't just about the past, it's about the future. Every time we uncover an ancient glider's aerodynamics or reverse engineer a temple's celestial alignment, we're not just studying history, we're rediscovering ideas. The Baghdad Battery hints at early electrochemistry. The Nazca Lines' wind-responsive patterns could revolutionize runway design. These fragments aren't dead ends, they're alternate paths, roads not taken in our rush toward modern technology. What if the key to sustainable flight or even interstellar travel has been buried in plain sight for millennia? That's the true power of these mysteries. They don't just rewrite history, they rekindle curiosity. In a world where answers are a click away, ancient flight reminds us that some questions still defy easy explanations. It's a call to look closer at the artifacts gathering dust in museums, to reread myths not as fairy tales but as technical manuals, to see temples not just as places of worship but as repositories of forgotten science. So keep questioning, keep exploring. The next clue might be hiding in a neglected manuscript, a half-translated inscription, or even a childhood myth you've heard 100 times. And if you've got a theory or a favorite artifact, share it below. This conversation is just getting started. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's unsolved puzzles. Because the sky isn't the limit, it's an invitation. An invitation to look up, to wonder, and to remember that the greatest discoveries often begin with a single, impossible